Welcome, welcome, welcome to our very first NeuroMovement Revolution podcast. I am so very excited. I have been waiting to do this for a few years actually. And first of all, I want to tell you who is sitting next to me. It's my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Neil Sharp, and he's going to be part of this podcast today. And the topic of the podcast is what is it like to be the child with special needs? Again, what is it like to be the child with special needs? So, Neil, how about we just get started?
Okay, well, I guess I have a question for you off the bat, Anat. This is your first podcast. It's very exciting, but you've got a lot on your plate at the moment. So why add to it a podcast, and why now?
Okay, wow, thank you for the question. For many years now, when I sit in a room with a parent or or grandparent or caretaker, and there things happen, and either they ask me a question or there's something I see that I would like them to know or learn or understand. I find myself talking to them and explaining things and basically doing a lot of an educational process within each private session. And very often I think, oh my God, I wish thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people could hear this. And part of it is because I think it's valuable, and part of it is because it's unique. Every child is different, every caretaker is different, and every situation is different. And when this happens, I think, I don't know that I'll come around to it again in this specific way. On the other side of things, I find myself educating or explaining, or parents having needs that repeat themselves pretty much across the board. So then I go like, oh my God, I hope more people could hear it if they were interested, because then they could make use of it. So that's the answer why have a podcast. And we're so lucky nowadays to have podcasts that we really can go and tell people things from, so to speak, the top of the mountain. And why now? Because it took this long to put it together. I wanted to start 3 years ago, but we have you that helps, and we have our amazing team, Tran and Doug and Dalit, and so we're able to do it. I couldn't have done it, as they say, without you.
And I guess, following on now to our, very exciting, our first podcast, what would you say is the first thing you'd like to tell our audience here today about ABMNM, Anat Baniel method NeuroMovement?
Wow, this makes me emotional. Oof, this question. Yeah. And the single thing I would like to say to everyone on this podcast this morning, or anyone who is going to listen to it later on, is the possibilities that are out there for your child, for you, and for your family are way beyond what you probably already envision. I've been doing this work with children for over 30 years. I began doing it not being even trained to work with children, and I was told over and over again what's not possible. And being very young in my 20s and pretty rebellious in my temperament, I says who? And I discovered over and over again the possibilities just pop that seemed impossible before. So that's what I want people to know to start.
And excuse me for beaming, but this is our first experience of running one of these. So I just looked down and I see that people are already putting comments up on Facebook, and we have 180 people on.
Wow.
And I can't say hi to all the people on because there are so many people who've already messaged, but there's some really wonderful familiar faces as well as some brand new ones. So this is very exciting for us.
Hi, everybody. Yeah. So what do you want to ask me next?
What do I want to ask you next?
Ask me how I started.
There you go.
What was it like?
What was
something.
It like?
I don't know.
Well,
whatever.
So first of all, you call this the NeuroMovement revolution. Why call it a revolution?
Well, because I'm a revolutionary. I'm not a socialist. Anyway, the thing is, I call it a revolution. I call it a breakthrough. It's a shift. It's a jump. It's a hop, or what people would call a paradigm shift or paradigm, transformation. In human knowledge, and there have been the progression of knowledge very often takes place in what seems like a discontinuous process, right? So we live in one pond and we swim in that pond and we know the fish in that pond and the trees around that pond, and it's our pond and it's our reality. And then all of a sudden a stranger comes from God knows where, and they come from an ocean and they start talking about an ocean, and for the people in the pond it makes no sense. There are waves and it's salty and lots of it, a lot more of it, and they don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? However, maybe and people usually actually get scared when things are novel and unknown to them. So very often what that will do is it'll stop people from even checking it out. And then one person gets curious enough and they go to the ocean with that visitor, and they come back and they either just stay there because they love the ocean and they never come back and you never hear from them again, or they come back and they want to tell the people there is this thing called ocean. And that has been really the process. And I believe, and I'm not alone in this, I mean, the whole area of neuroplasticity, that means the quality of the brain, that it changes itself in response to its experience, is a huge shift, a huge revolution in human knowledge, and as a result in human experience, human expectations, and experimentation. I started it based on I was always interested in the brain. I can't tell you why. I was studying to be a psychotherapist. But I don't know. We are born with some things. We get to have ideas somehow. I have no idea how that happens, but I know it happens a lot. And then I connected with Dr. Feldenkrais, and he was the quantum physicist that, due to his own personal story, looked how to heal himself from a knee injury, and he understood that we have to communicate with the brain. And he was painfully ahead of his time. I mean, he had very few people asking about ocean. And even those who didn't quite grasp it usually. So he was a true revolutionary. And I studied with him and have taken his work and evolved it over the past 30 years or more. And I think, aside from understanding more and more and defining the 9 essentials, which we will talk about, I was not indoctrinated into getting a specific outcome. I was not indoctrinated into anything with children. So when I saw the child, the first child that I can remember till today, but I won't tell it right now, I looked at her and she was so stopped. She had a massive brain, lack of oxygen after birth. and shortly after birth, and I just looked to see how I can communicate with her. I knew it's about the brain, and I was just really wondering. And that's, by the way, what I teach my trainees, my practitioners. The first thing is to wonder, and I still wonder. I mean, I'm doing a podcast and I go like, I wonder, let's see how it's going to go. We prepare and so on. And what I discovered is that she responded and changed. Was she able to roll? She was 22 months old. She couldn't do anything. Her eyes were crossed. She couldn't talk. She was completely spastic. No. Could she right away turn over? Or no. But she woke up and there was something going on between her and me. And there was a change. There was a change in the freedom in her legs. There was a change in the freedom in her very spastic arm. And that for me was all I needed. I didn't need more evidence than that there was a person there that was responding to me and there was a brain there that was saying yes to me. And that is a revolution. What we do is a revolution between the neuroscience and the applications. It's a big change, and people are really ready for it. People are really, really ready for it. And by the way, the biggest drivers of this revolution in terms of the work with the children are the parents. The parents are driving the change, not the professionals. Yeah.
And I'm smiling. There's a comment from Lucy Byler. I hope I've got your name right, but she basically says, bring on the revolution, Anat.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. I can use all the support in the army to go with.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions?
So, well, I think, you titled this this podcast, What is it like to be the child with special needs? So maybe we should get into that.
Why did
you choose that, and what do you want to say?
Yeah, when I was looking for what to call or what topic or what to focus on, I was like sitting in a pot filled with popcorn, and my ideas was like, oh, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this, because I want you guys to get everything now in the next 10 seconds. However, that's not possible. So maybe it's possible, but I haven't gotten there yet to figure out how to do that. And one of the things that for me is so central in working with the children and really drives my passion is the child. And from my experience, again, somehow spontaneously, I landed in that from the very, very beginning, was the child. How is the child feeling? What are they feeling? How are they responding? Is what we are doing, maybe partly because my background is also in psychology and clinical psychology, I don't know, but it's like we are doing, look, when a child is born with obvious challenges, all children are special needs, by the way. If you haven't noticed, they're born and they're 100% dependent. They have lots and lots and lots of needs. And they need to learn everything they're going to be able to know, do, understand, and understand. So every child has to move from what I call the no to the yes, for the cannot to the can, from the don't know to the know, from the impossible to the possible. You take a 3-month-old child and you try to get it to crawl, it's impossible. Everything we don't know to do yet, at the time we don't know to do it, is still an impossibility. We assume it's going to become possible because hundreds and hundreds of millions or billions of times. Just open the door one time, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I have my darling Dalit here being very careful not to make noise like people opening a wrapper, in the theater, a candy wrapper. Anyway, so totally unrelated. The reason there's a little commotion because my dear Neil, left his computer back in San Francisco.
The computer that we were going to use for the podcast.
So now it's being Ubered over. So you're really in the know. Anyway, so coming back to what I'm talking about, it's always from the impossible to the possible. So what I'm going to say is not just about children with special needs. It's about any living human being that is looking to move from where they're now to somewhere new, to be able to do something new. So looking at those children, I saw that they were responding to what is being done with them. Even when they were talked about, even when they were very little and they didn't really understand necessarily the content, I observed that if parents started talking about the trauma that might have happened at birth and so on, the child was changing. And then when I was told some of the things that were done in therapy, and I started many years ago, so some of those things, by the way, are not done anymore because there's an evolution everywhere, including in the physical therapy world and occupational therapy world. I was just horrified because I thought, what would I feel if it were done to me? And as I've been doing now this work for a long time, the child's experience is what we rely on for the child to learn and change. It's the child that's going to learn. It's the child that's going to learn. So the skill, for example, if we want the child to be able to sit up or stand or whatever it is that the child can do, or look us in the eye or talk to us or any of those things, excuse me, it's the child that has to learn it, and it has to come through the child's experience. And we can create conditions and experience where the child is going to be more open to the learning and be able to figure it out, because it's the child's brain that has to change. It's the child's brain that has to learn. And the brain doesn't learn. And over the next few weeks and few months in this podcast, we're going to go through a lot of different aspects of what I'm saying to you now in very general terms. But it's not a hat. It's not like you put a hat on the top of the head and somehow now the child has this skill. And I would guess that, and Neil will get the comments, that at least a few of you have a child that has been getting a lot of intervention or some intervention where it's been attempted to get the child to do something and the child is still not doing it. There is no guarantee that every child will be able to do everything that they can't do right now, but there's almost a guarantee that if you're trying to make a child do something they're far away from, they're either never going to be able to do it or they will do it very poorly, and it puts a ceiling, an invisible ceiling as to how far they'll move on in the future. And that's not because of me saying it, it's because of how we operate. So I thought, and also a lot of parents suffer, not just because and terrified and concerned and worried and actually traumatized. I really think that the parent side, which is also what we're going to focus on later on, not today, but in the podcast in general, is also very important to pay attention to and provide tools and so on and so forth. But when we work with a child, it has to be the very first thing when we interact with a child. The very first thing, the very first question, the very first I wonder, how is what I'm doing or the conditions I'm creating for the child, how does it impact the child? How does it occur to the child? So that is the reason, because that's the very first thing. Without it, I don't know how to talk about my work.
Thank you.
It was a bit long.
It was perfect. Because you needed to give a context for why you chose the topic, and then when we move on, because you asked for questions in advance, and we have a bunch of questions that I think we should now move on to.
Okay. If I find them. So first of all, thank you all for those of you who submitted questions. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful questions. I am not going to be able in this hour, 45 minutes or hour, to answer all the questions. So I selected actually 4 groups of questions that had similarities to them. And by the way, many of your questions really were, right on target for the topic. I mean, you really picked from the topic what it's all about. So I'm going to read the first 3 questions, and then actually the first one, it's 2 questions that we grouped together, or I grouped together. And I'm going to say your name. I'll say your first name because I don't know if you want to stay anonymous for you or your child. So Esther asked, how persistent do we have to be with all the therapies that a special needs child goes through when it's not enjoyable for her or him? After a few sessions of not enjoying, do we stop, change the therapist, give a break, or what? I mean, that was the very first question that we got in. And Esther, it's perfect. If you're listening now, Neil will be taking comments, and that's the way we could communicate. So if you're on, just
let us know that you're on, and
then right away. But I'm going to answer your question anyway. So it's right in the center of this whole conversation. What is the child's experience being the child? I'm just thinking of last week. I worked with a few children. I keep working because I want to with children and adults. I give private sessions with my team. We work as a team of teachers. But also I do it because I feel that if I don't do it, in a few months, it's all going to become theoretical. Because every child is a reminder, but also every child is a story by itself. So it's an invention from scratch. It's a discovery from scratch. It's creating a relationship with a complex individual human being. Anywhere from a few days old, that's the youngest I've worked with, to however old, it's right there. So in SNCS, and I'm going to talk about it a whole, another podcast, but moving to the connection from trying to fix. So when a child comes into the room of a therapist or a teacher or somebody like that for the first time, it's very natural for them to be a little cautious, a little apprehensive. It's actually a sign very often of health, of alertness, of they're noticing. You see, you'll start getting used to how I think. I look at the child and say, oh, they're noticing they're in a new place. Good, check. They're awake, they're aware. Because if I get a child that doesn't notice anything, I have a much bigger job trying to get that brain to start doing its job than a child that walks in and say, hey, mom, where am I? I'm not sure I like it. A child that has already had not even therapy, but medical emergencies, painful experiences, they might be fearful. A child that has had therapies where, there was forcing or discomfort for the child, or failure. The kids know when they fail. They can't say the word failure. They don't understand what is going on, but they get the point on a diffuse feeling level. They will get the point that somehow they're wrong, or they're bad, or they disappointed, or you can use any adjective you want in here, or verb. But coming back to what I started saying, the fact that the child initially is apprehensive or cries or wants to run the other way is no indication that that's not the right place for them. They don't even know where they are. It's the job of the teacher, we're teachers, or the therapist, if you take them to a therapist, to interact with them in a way that will give them a sense of safety. And children normally, unless they've been really traumatized quite severely in a variety of different ways, it doesn't mean necessarily through therapy, are very happy to be happy. That's one of the most common things we hear from parents is my child, before there's like necessarily, oh my God, they're standing up or something, they're happier, And a child might cry a little bit during the lesson. And there is a differentiation between sometimes a child has learned to cry, they can't communicate, and they're little, and their way of getting what they want is through crying. And there can be criteria that you can decide. I have the parents sit in the sessions, in the lessons with me, and all of us do that. And we do that for a variety of reasons. One reason, a small child and their parent are one brain. They're one heart, they're one brain. You as a parent are the world of the child. And I want the whole world of the child to be in the room when the child is changing. I want it for the child and I want it for the adult. Because when your child changes, guess what? You change too. When your child is healthy and happy, it's much easier for you to be free, healthy, and happy. I don't know if you've noticed, but you probably have. So, and I want the child to be safe. I want the parent to get educated. Now, there are moments or times where I ask the parent to leave the room, and I have a very specific reason to do it, and it becomes part of the process. You're in the room, you're outside of the room. And when the kids are older, like they're closer to, preteens or teens, they can choose if they want the parent in the room or not. They're at the age where they can make the choice. Again, unless I have a reason I want the parent to be in, and then I tell them that that's how it's going to go, and we work with what is going on. But otherwise, it's their choice. And very often they want the parent out, which is fine. It's just fine. But with the littler ones, definitely have the parent in the room normally. And when you're in the room, why am I talking about it? When you're in the room, you're there. You can see what's happening and you can feel what's happening. And you can see if your child is asked to do things or kind of forced a bit or in a way that is not working very well. And if you stay with us in our revolution, we don't ask people to do what they can't do, because I have a very simple idea about that. If you could, you would. If he could, he would. If she could, she would. So we work in a way that we start always where the child is, physically, emotionally, cognitively, interpersonally, and we can focus on different aspects. It doesn't matter right now any details. And we are all built to be connected. Human beings are depending and are neurologically built to be in connection with others. So your child, if things are working for them, they will want to be connected to the therapist. They will want to be in the room. They will get more vital and happier as a result of the work. You don't have to know the profession of the therapist. So that's a criteria that is very, very general. Now, sometimes the child doesn't want to go because they'd rather be with their friends, sometimes because they're tired and hungry, sometimes because, I don't know. So don't be afraid of your child, of their reactions. Now, I'll go now to the other side. If your child consistently cries, consistently is unhappy, consistently whatever, I would not continue. Just like you would not have your child stand on a nail and cry because you think it makes them better somehow. I just won't do it, because what you're doing is you're training the child into a few things. One, for the failures they're experiencing, you're training them to somehow dissociate and ignore their pain, and you're making them less good learners, because learning goes through discovering what can be done easily and comfortably. And the third thing is you are giving them the experience that you are not protecting them at moments where they need protection. No, I don't mean jump and grab your child and run out of the room screaming, but fundamentally say, sweetie, I see that this is really uncomfortable for you, so we're going to stop this now. You can also talk to the therapist, say, look, I'd like to work with you, but I need my child to like what you're doing. Can you do that? You're asking them to do things they don't like. Give them Kids Beyond Limits, my book, to read. If they're open for it, sure, stay. If they're not open for it, find somebody that has a big heart and work with them. Because you want a therapist that, and by the way, therapists suffer too. When they have kids crying all day long, that's awful. Or if they're not progressing, it's very hard. But they have been trained to this, some of them, in the more old-fashioned ways, let's put it this way, to dissociate from their own feelings. I mean, I'd rather a child not learn to do something than learn all the things I just named. So that's my first part of this question. Is there any comments or questions on that?
There are. It's difficult to keep up with them.
Okay, just randomly pick one.
Let me see.
Okay, I'll continue and you study those. So the next question, when does a special needs child perceive that she or he is different from other children? It can vary. Children perceive that they're different from other children and they don't have to have special needs. Anybody, if you look into your own childhoods, what is the first time that you perceived that a little Jill or little Johnny was faster than you or more popular than you or had different kind of skin color than you? I mean, we perceive differences. That's our brain is built to do that. The question is, when do they perceive that they are wrong or not okay? You see, if all children were born with their right arm paralyzed, there would be nothing different, right? So I will answer and get into that question from a different direction again in another podcast. My suggestion in general is, as a parent, and that's one of the big things we do with parents, is that your child, I know it sounds gooey and weird and ridiculous, your child is perfect as they are right now. They really are. They're not what you expected. They have challenges. We're not going to act Pollyanna and pretend they're not work to do. However, in my world, they are perfect. Those children, we just have, so I was going to say, first example, I didn't say the example, that one, I'll skip it for now, but we have a child that came to us from Europe. They're here for 8 weeks. And the child has to be suctioned because she has all this mucus. She's fed through a feeding tube, can't hold her head, can't do pretty much any voluntary movement. Within 2 lessons, Neil, first of all, they need to suction a lot less. That means that the higher centers of the brain are now regulating the lower centers a bit better. That's already changed. You named what she's doing now. She's
This was after 2 weeks, not after 2 lessons.
No, after 2 lessons, she started interacting.
Absolutely. But now
she's like woke up. She was nowhere, right? She woke up.
She's able to track people. She'll see a new face and she'll smile and she'll interact.
And how old is she? 10 months.
She's 18 months.
Michelle said this morning she rolls to the side. She comes back, and Michelle narrates to her. That's one of our practitioners, and she says, "You just roll to your side," and she smiles. And then she says, "You just roll to your back," and she smiles. That will give you an example. I mean, this girl, as she's now, she's whole, she's perfect, and we're moving her to be a different version of herself, whole and perfect, and then a different version of herself, whole and perfect. And let me tell you, I'm not Pollyanna. Anybody who knows me and sees me work, I drive. I know they can do better, and I go for them doing better, but in the way we do it.
So there's a comment here from Amy Elizabeth Harrell. And she says, "This was a tremendous paradigm shift for me. My daughter, from a medical perspective, needed multiple things that had to be fixed. So I had to try stopping to fix her, or stop trying to fix her." There was another one. So there's a question here. Is it good and right when the child is playing with toys in an ABM session? So this goes along with the first part of your question about...
Well, yeah, you see that there isn't an absolute good or right or recipes. It can be the perfect thing to do, and we do it a lot, and I use it a lot. And oftentimes children eventually graduate from playing with toys because they get very focused on their own feelings and what they do. And it varies. Let me tell you what I do. I am an equal opportunity practitioner. I go for what works. And the toys, and by the way, when the kids play with toys, it's not like they don't feel what the practitioner does. You know, if they don't like what's happening, they're going to stop playing and they're going to start crying. And the toys are also a great way that when they move and can do more, they can reach, they can shift, they can... So if your child is getting better, whatever the practitioner is doing is the right thing to do. If your child is not getting better, then the question mark, better meaning changes, not better like the outcome that, I don't know, that doctor wants to see or something. Change. The only way to get from point A to B is to change and change some more, and then another session change, and then spontaneously get to the next skill level.
Another comment here, Lisanne drew in. This is from a few minutes ago. She said, I totally agree. This is an active process and parents should be present unless it really creates a major distraction. She says, disclosure, I'm an OT. I've been fortunate to attend some of your day-long classes many years ago.
Oh, what's her name?
Lisanne.
Hi, Lisanne. Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
And another comment from the same mother who said she needed to move from the fixing model. She says, I just did a movement lesson this morning and I do it with my daughters every day. My daughter with Down syndrome went from laying flat, no movement, no communication, and not eating, to moving, communicating, interacting, and eating with only 2 months of movement lessons. Thank you so much, in capitals, for sharing your work with the world. Our lives are deeply impacted.
Thank you. And Neil, Amy, thank you. And Neil, these are wonderful testimonies and encouraging for the audience, but I also want to hear if people have concerns or questions or stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go because I have these here. In the same neighborhood of the first group of questions, Cindy, at what point should all the therapies... Oh, okay, so to answer, after a few sessions, not enjoying, stop, I would say, when I started doing the work, I'd say to parents, give me 3 sessions. If you like, and I schedule them for a session a day for 5 days running, and that's another thing we can talk in the future. We call it intensives, but that has to do with how the brain learns and the most efficient way to spend the resources, both money and time. But I said, give me 3 sessions, and after 3 sessions, it either will be totally obvious why you want to continue, or if there's not enough change, you see, but I see, we can discuss it. Or if it doesn't work, you don't come back. And that's how I did it. So I put this, I didn't do it as a challenge for me, but I did it as a practical thing, because if I don't see change when I work with someone, I won't continue working with them. I challenge myself to figure out what's going on, to see if I can change the fact that there is no change. But if I am not a condition, an opportunity for the child or the adult to change, and I can perceive very, very, very subtle changes. And for me, subtle changes, especially when somebody like a Down syndrome child that doesn't move, or this baby from Europe that I mentioned, they're not going to do big, impressive stuff to begin with. They're not going to just roll over and say, hi, Mom, I love being here. It's not going to look like that. It's going to look like what people call small changes. But there isn't a small or big change in the brain. There is either a change or no change in the brain. We give it a value of big or small depending on our ability to perceive changes, which everybody can develop to get more and more skillful at, and also our expectations. It's not even an expectation. My intention and purpose is to provide an opportunity for positive change. And when the brain changes, like when Neil said, now she's following people and tracking. Oh, big deal. She's 10 months and she's lying on her back and following and tracking with her eyes. But she's supposed to already stand up and crawl. No, but a brain that was so devastated at birth and now is figuring a way to start organizing itself and giving meaning to movement, because otherwise it's a soup. It's just like nothing. She wasn't able to organize, to make sense of anything. Now that she could do some of it, but very little. Now it's a huge change. A third of the cerebral cortex is visual cortex. Hello? So you can call it a small change, or you can say, oh my God, if she could do this, I wonder what she could do next. And when she does the next thing, you say, oh my God, what could she do next? And we don't know. We can just move along with it for the ride. So, and if you don't see that kind of change and that kind of shifts in your child, look for something that provides that for your child. At what point should, then somebody else asked, at what point should all therapies stop? I don't know. I mean, depends. I just talked about it. If it's not working, stop. Anything we do that doesn't work, we might as well look for an alternative. But in terms of how many years should anybody be in therapy, I just don't call it therapy. I call it learning, and I call it lessons. Every day of your life till you die. I just taught a one-day workshop this weekend for adults. We had 80 people, a lot of them older people. It was geared for adults and people with pain and stuff like that, anti-aging. And it was spectacular to see the room transform from really people walking and kind of, people are older in their 60s and 70s. And one guy had already was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And then there were younger people, and there were some parents and some therapists. It was a mixture. But it was kind of like, a brain that's already kind of not really there. And having 80 people like that starting the workshop, it's kind of like, okay, I've got my work cut out for me. After lunch, there was such a vibrant room, and the humor and the joy and the sense of possibility in every one of them. I can see some of them I knew, some of them not. And the sense of hope. And as Michael Merzenich, the famous neuroscientist, says about this work, it's not false hope, it's real hope, it's concrete hope. The child gets hopeful because they feel better, they change. They don't know to call it hope, but they have it. Yes.
There is a follow-up question here. It's from Jessica Berger. Hi, Jessica, from the UK. How important is the one-to-one relationship with the particular ABM practitioner? And if it doesn't quite work, then at what point do you suggest trying a different ABM practitioner? And if a family can have a variety of practitioners, is that the ideal way?
Okay. Well, you'll see that some of my answers tend to be repetitive. I would converse with the practitioner. If anybody, a therapist, a practitioner, a doctor, anybody that sees your child has committed their life to help other people. So I know that anybody who does this work is always coming from the right place. So that's number one. But your child, you are the custodian of your child. You're the protector of your child. You're the future of your child. So if the ABM practitioner, somehow it's not working that well, you can ask for time, and I always recommend, I do that when I work with professionals. I always offer to pay for their time. Even if it's a 15-minute call or 30, they can be gracious and say, no, thank you, or they can take the money. But then you're clean, you move forward, you take the time of the practitioner, and you ask them, tell them your observation, ask them if that's their observation. If they also feel that it's not going that great. So we don't try to hide the cow under the table, right? Or the elephant. It's right there in the room. I don't know why I said cow, but never mind. And, and that's what my brain threw into my mouth. Anyway, but the thing is, either something can be done that it gets better, and if it's not, I wouldn't keep going. We don't want to reinforce, to drive in, to groove in failure. Success is is the main mechanism by which the brain selects what to keep and what to not keep. Not every, again, it's a whole other conversation. Success, that means the experience of success. Sometimes we call success things that are not success, and we carry it throughout our life, and we need to get rid of the idea of what success, like learned helplessness or things like that. But success is what happens. We don't want a child coming and it's not working, and then it's not working, and it's not working. It's kind of like relationships. You're going to have a new friend. It will behoove both sides to have really great experiences together. Otherwise, this association is like, oh, and then learning doesn't happen very well. When there are a number of practitioners, if they collaborate with one another, then it can be a really good thing. I have found out in my, practice, never mind again the whole story, but the first time I brought another practitioner to help do some of the lessons I was doing with the kids, because I was teaching a training. She had hardly ever worked with kids. She was terrified. The only reason she agreed is because I really pleaded with her to do it. And she was a bit clumsy. She wasn't, today she's traveling the world teaching everywhere, but and she's amazing, but she was a bit clumsy. And I saw it, but I just went like, just keep doing, because I wanted the kids it was in the middle of a process that I was working with them. And I came back to work with them, and every child made a significant, observable change from when I left them. There was a hop, and I went like, damn, this is a good idea. The brain gets more variability. It learns from more people. So now that's the way we work at our center exclusively. There are other practitioners that have adopted this approach. But if the practitioners are not comfortable collaborating, or they're not organized to do it, do it with one, do it with two, you'll figure it out. I'm sure you will. Okay, moving on. So there are questions about what I call regression, a group of questions about why doesn't my child keep his or her skills? And for that, I would say a few things. As some of you, if there are probably some parents with children on the autism spectrum on this call, and many of the kids that are on the spectrum have gone through a massive regression, that got them to the place where they got the diagnosis, right? And there could be different other conditions that might call upon regression. I worked with a child that, as I worked with him, he improved, but then started regressing. And he would improve a little bit, then regressing. And I started wondering what's happening in the brain in terms of the metabolic processes and the myelination, what happens when we learn this myelination on the neurons, on the axons. Yeah, I remember that, but many people know what that means. The neurons. And I had her go and check his brain, and he has a condition where there is a loss of the myelin, yes, insulation. The insulation that allows for the electrical signals to go at the right speed and reach from one cell to the other. So at that point, of course, they could, because our work helps build myelin, the disease tends to take it down. So, but it was the only time in my career, and I've worked with thousands of kids, that was specifically my consideration, and that's why I sent them. So it's not very common. I don't want to scare, the parents here. Let me start with something that might make a few of you feel a little guilty. Don't, because you always are doing the best you can. You really are. I mean, you're on this call, hello. But one thing that will cause regression is over repetition. When a child does something new they never did before, I make sure to stop it.
Stop asking them to do it.
And actually stopping them from doing it, even if it depends. Sometimes they spontaneously try again and again. But I train the parents, don't clap, we're going to get to that. And don't ask them to do it again, because when somebody does something for the first time, sometimes we don't even know we're doing it, but we certainly don't know how we got there. So we're not ready to intentionally call upon that capability. We're simply not ready for it. And when we call upon that capability, and especially if there's excitement and anticipation and clapping hands and God knows what else, it creates, the child can't do it, and it creates inhibition on what was just formed. And it can make it that the child or you will never, if you do it to yourself, will never get there again. Because most of the things a healthy child does for the first time, you're not even around to know they're doing it. You're not there. They stood up and you were in another room, or it doesn't matter. Let's not take that tack of talking. That's very important. Your child does something new. Don't just leave them alone. Breathe in and out as if they've already done it 1,000 times. That's a general recommendation. When you ask a child to repeat things again and again, and I'm going to ask the lead to just put the thing so I know where I stand. Thank you very much. We're almost running out of time, so I'm going to go a little faster about that. But I'll tell you a quick story. So, child on the autism spectrum, I think around 8 or 9, and a good friend of mine, a very bright guy, told me that he took him to a place where they were working on trying to help the child understand math better. And they asked him a question, and the child answered, and he answered correctly. And then they asked him the same question again, and he answered correctly. And they asked him the same question again. And by the 5th time, the child started saying other answers. So the therapist kept asking the question because now the answer was wrong. He had a method. I don't know which method it is. I don't know where he learned to do it, but that it's not enough to ask once to get the good. You have to make sure that they really know what they're saying. Now, if I asked you a question and you gave me the answer, and I asked you again, and on the 3rd time, you would think that you've said something wrong. The kid was intelligent. He started figuring out that the correct answer was wrong. So, of course, that dad never brought him back there again. But that's an extreme example. And what you can't do, and if you're in a position or in a therapy where the child is trying to do something and people are helping him do it and it's not working well, and you do it again and again, guess what he's learning? He's learning his experience. He's learning the failure. He's learning what we call failure. He's learning the experience. So if something doesn't work, don't repeat it. Go somewhere else. We'll talk about the essentials. I can't talk about it today. And if they do something that works, don't repeat. They might repeat spontaneously, like this girl that was diagnosed with low IQ. Can you imagine? And after, what was it, the 3rd day?
It was the 2nd day.
It was the 2nd day. Yeah, I worked with her one session. Doesn't matter what I did. She came in fearful and like this and like that. And I connected with her. And at a certain point, I looked at her and I said, I really like you. And she looks at me straight in my eyes and she says, I like you too. And I went like, damn, this is an intelligent person. So what I did is I asked Neil to start working with her. She's 5 on the way we work on reading and writing, because I want to catch her before she goes to the usual way of teaching it. And you tell very briefly what happened.
Well, actually, I think this is something we can come back to in future podcasts. But there's some things here.
But yes, just say. But never mind what he did. At the end of the day, she went home and
spontaneously wrote letters and narrated under her breath. And the mother came in the next day and said, actually, it was pretty shocking because it was so unexpected. But yes. I have a couple of comments. Yes, I'm appreciating the information being shared here, but I don't feel the topic has been fully addressed. what is it like to be the child with special needs? I was hoping to get more information about the inner experience of the child and different ways a child might communicate, demonstrate learning concepts and emotions. And that has touched on some of that, but would appreciate having more in-depth information.
Well, who asked that?
Susie Lippener, and then there was another.
Okay, that's good enough. Yeah. Susie, thank you for giving me the feedback, because I wouldn't have known without it. So the thing that I would, can you get rid of this? The thing that I would say, first of all, what's the experience is look at your child. If they're crying, if they start shrinking and cowering, if they, and I'm talking about the experiences that they get as a result of our interaction with them because of their special needs. I mean, we want to look across the everything, but specifically, if a child can't stand up, and people are trying to force him, and his legs get spastic, and he's, doing. It is an enormous invalidation. It's constant, try it again, no, now try it again. So I'm not saying not to do things with a child, but it's so disempowering. And I think that it teaches the child straightforward that they're not good enough. Who knows what they make up in their own mind? But in the field of likely possibilities, I'm not good enough. Mommy doesn't love me. I've done something wrong. I'm responsible for people around me being upset or angry or something. It's a diffuse sense of wrongness that children, they can't form something more specific, and they think that they are the cause of everything because they're little, and that's how we are built to be when we are very little, the center of the world. We are the center of the world until we grow and can have little additions to it. So it's the way you touch them. It's the tone of voice. And I don't mean never be angry at your child. On the contrary, I mean, I want to know if Susie, if you can just communicate if that's the direction.
And I want to let you know, we have a 15-second delay between your typing your comment and my seeing it. So if you just bear with us with that. But Susie, if you could follow up on that. But I know that, and this is something you will go into in much greater depth in later podcasts. I know one of the things you're always saying is, don't think that the child's experience is what we perceive or think their experience is. Their experiences are very different. For example, a child on the spectrum may have some seemingly very extreme behaviors, but from
their point of view,
their point of view, they may not even be aware of it, but we see this, very dramatic thing.
Yeah, and it's as Neil said, we don't know exactly what the experience of the child, but we can observe the child and we can imagine being them. So let me give you a very simple example. A child, I'll give you two examples. So in general, and then kind of put it more on a child with special needs. So for example, one of the things that happens with parents, and totally understandably, as we work with a child and the child can do more, the parent has been trained that the child can't do certain things. So they have a tendency to jump in and do it for the child really quickly. And we stop the parents because we want to let the child an opportunity to do it themselves and or discover that it didn't work, and because we feel that they already have the ability to redirect themselves to get the thing to work, whatever. They wanted to catch a toy or go down to the floor or get up or whatever it is. When you jump in for the child over and over again, and especially if you do it with anxiety, again, you give the child an experience that something is dangerous, that something is wrong. So that is true across the board, by the way, everything I say. But with a child with special needs, maybe the one single thing I would like all of you to take from this in a more pointed way. When the interventions with the child are done to fix the child from the point of view of the intervener, it's a word I hope, then the child gets that they are not okay. The specifics of it, I don't know. I had a woman in the conference, in the workshop, probably in her late 50s, early 60s, came up to me at the lunch break and said, Anat, the first 10 minutes were already worth the price of admission. That was nice to hear. I said, how come? She says, I have scoliosis. And when I was a child and they started whatever they did with her, I felt that my spine was wrong. It's her words. It was amazing. And she said, and as a result, I disconnected from my spine. I lived my life like I don't have a spine because my spine was where I was really bad and wrong. And whatever I did in the first 10 minutes, she said, I connected with my spine and I'm going to have a different life from now on. So that gives you a 50-something-year-old having had scoliosis or having scoliosis, as a child. But I want to make sure you don't get afraid of doing things with your child. Just check where you're coming from and create kind of more spaciousness in yourself for it to work or not work and move on and not give a lot of weight to any specific thing, except if there are some behaviors that are dangerous for the child or dangerous for other people, and we'll talk about it another time. Anything else?
So, Susie, thank you. First of all, Susie wasn't clear what you were asking her, but now she says the last comments you've been making, these last few minutes, are what I was hoping for today. Thank you.
Oh, at least Susie's happy.
Now, one thing, we are going to close up very shortly, but one thing I want to say is a lot of you have asked questions, and they're amazing questions. We have all these comments archived. We're going to go back and we're going to mine these amazing comments and questions. And these questions will be addressed in future podcasts.
And any topics you would love to know about, we might then send a how is it called? The monkey survey or something?
Yeah, Survey Monkey.
You need a
Isn't
lesson.
Survey Monkey.
Okay. However it's called, because when we see questions, we want to know how many of you would like to have these topics addressed, because we'd like to, of course, address as many of your interests as much as possible.
So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for being on here. This has been such a thrill for us to do. It's very exciting. It's our first one. And it'll get smoother, although,
it was smooth enough.
Hopefully. And thank you, Anat. It's always a privilege to hear you speak and to be here with you. So thank you so much.
And I want to thank everybody that's on this podcast. Love having you. Thank you for all your comments, and give more or email us or however it works. And I want to actually by name thank Doug and Tran, because they really worked very, very hard to make sure that this works as well as it worked today. And we're going to be doing this every week. So I hope to see you again next Tuesday, and get more people on and send us requests, and goodbye for today. And also, if you learned anything that you use already, we'd love to hear about that.
Thank you. Goodbye.